Generation Z have been hit hardest by job losses.
We're living in two separate economies. The American dream that was pitched to the Gen Xers and the Boomers is no longer present in today's world.
Arguably the largest issue that Gen Z Americans are facing today is that they cannot find work, with the youth unemployment rate now standing at over 10%. And this has some pretty serious consequences.
We're actually projecting that about 1 in 4 young adults today will never have kids.
For younger Americans, home ownership is increasingly out of reach.
For the first time in modern history, a bachelor degree is no longer a reliable path to professional employment.
Now, obviously, reducing the youth unemployment rate wouldn't solve all of these issues, but it is a necessary first step to getting there. Unfortunately, though, America is moving in the opposite direction, with far fewer jobs being made this year than were initially anticipated. In fact, this is such a large problem that the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics was recently fired for daring to accurately report that America's economy is just not producing enough jobs. And ever since her firing, the government has been as slow as it can be at releasing new job statistics. So what are the most recent numbers, and what do they tell us about why young people can't find work? Well, simply put, in July of 2025, only 73,000 jobs were created. And while it might sound like a lot, it's not when we consider the fact that 2.5 million young Americans are currently unemployed, with millions more being underemployed. And that fact very clearly shows that the issue at hand isn't that young people don't want to work, it's that young people cannot find jobs even if they want them. And so the natural question then becomes, why is this the case? Why are more jobs not being created despite the enormous economic growth America has seen in recent years? There are 3 things going on. But before I get into the first reason, if you enjoy content like this, then please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you so much. And with that said, the first reason why the economy isn't producing more jobs is because the economy isn't actually doing nearly as well as many people would have you believe. You've probably already seen this chart at some point showing that in the past 5 years, the Standard & Poor's 500 has seen enormous growth. And it's true. But what you might not have seen is this chart, showing that if we take out the Magnificent 7 stocks, basically the biggest tech companies in the world, then all of a sudden, the market hasn't done nearly as well over the past 5 years as we've been led to believe. And what that tells us is that basically in the last half decade, even more than before, our economy has fixated on just a few hyper specialized tech stocks. Now that fact is probably best illustrated by example. You already probably know that Facebook owns Instagram, but what you might not know is that when Facebook purchased Instagram for a full $1 billion, Instagram at that point only employed 13 people. Now, in no other segment of the economy would it be possible for one company to be worth that much money despite having that few employees. But in the tech industry, that's almost the norm. And so what that means is our economy has become fixated on a specific industry that doesn't employ people nearly as well as other parts of the economy. And the only ones who are really benefiting from that are the company shareholders, because they love low amounts of payroll. They love high evaluations. But for everyday Americans, they just want jobs. And these companies disproportionately just don't make those, at least not at the level we would expect. And now the natural consequence of that is that most people, particularly young people, have to compete for jobs in normal sectors of the economy that haven't seen nearly as much growth over the past 5 years. The problem there being that most companies just haven't seen enough growth in recent years to need to massively expand their pool of employees. And that's created the situation where companies are keeping their payroll, relatively speaking, at the same point as it was 5 years ago, meaning companies just don't need to hire young people, and so there aren't jobs for young people to find. Sadly though, this is only the start of the issue, because in addition to Americans competing against other Americans for work, they are now also having to compete against a larger labor pool. And maybe the best way I can illustrate that is through a recent interview.
If you want to raise wages for American workers, you can't flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of foreign workers.
You also do have to bring in talent.
We have plenty of talented people here.
No, you don't.
So beyond this interview clip going viral, resulting in people as far-flung as Dr. Amy Acton, the likely next Democratic nominee for the governorship of Ohio, all the way to Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, likely the furthest right person in Congress today, all using this as an opportunity to question the assertion that Americans are not talented, this interview has also led to the realization that approximately 80% of workers who are here on an H-1B visa are working in entry-level jobs. Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding about this topic, so let's break it down as honestly as we can. The US government offers many work visas. There are H visas, I visas, L visas, and the list goes on, all of them serving a different function. The H-1B visa particularly is designed to allow people from foreign countries to come to the United States who are of exceptional merit and ability to fill roles that would be hard to fill domestically. However, given the fact that 4 out of 5 people on this visa are working in entry-level roles, it shows that there was a breakdown between what the program was meant to be and what it is in practice. And this hurts basically everyone, because for young Americans who are desperately seeking entry-level roles, it means that they are having to compete not just against one another for jobs, but against an international pool of laborers for jobs that they need, particularly for the ones that are the highest paying. But the other side of this, the side that people don't talk about enough, is that this is also bad for immigrant laborers. Because in the words of Senator Sanders,
the reality of what the H-1B program is to replace good-paying American jobs with hundreds of thousands of lower-paid guest workers from abroad who are often treated as indentured servants.
And this is demonstrably true. We know for a fact that immigrant workers are less likely to quit their jobs than their American citizen counterparts, which makes sense. The consequences for quitting a job when you're living here on a work visa are just far higher than it would be for an American to quit a job. And this naturally leads to a position where immigrant laborers are able to be exploited, being paid lower wages than their American counterparts, because basically they have no choice but to accept that reality or risk trying to find another job and quite possibly being forced to leave the country. Now, of course, there is a winner in this situation, but not one I think anyone truly is happy to see win, which are major corporations. And this can best be seen by example. Microsoft this year, for instance, has decided that it was a good year to lay off thousands of American workers, despite the fact that they've seen record profits in 2025. Now, I get it. Companies sometimes have to lay off employees. That's just a part of the business cycle. What doesn't make quite as much sense, though, is that they have reportedly spent over $2 million this year lobbying the government to allow them to hire more people on work visas. So Microsoft somehow, despite making record profits, can't afford to pay American workers for their jobs, but they do have millions of dollars to throw at the government to try and get permission to hire more immigrant laborers. And so in short, if you're not a lobbyist working for a major corporation or a huge shareholder in a big company that is a part of this whole system, then you're losing because of this entire issue. And so in short, the people benefiting from this situation are the same ones who are trying to do anything that they can not to pay people a fair wage. But sadly, it doesn't stop here, because in corporations' constant pursuit to maximize profits, they've also done one little thing that's also really hurting Gen Z Americans' ability to find work, which is that companies would also prefer to just pay an AI client over paying a human employee. And if that sounds obvious, it probably is. But what might not be so obvious is how wide-reaching this problem is. Because no matter how many companies you think are now using AI, I guarantee you that your estimate is too low. Because according to McKinsey, which is one of the top 3 management consulting firms on the planet, as of today, at least 79% of companies use generative AI in at least one business function. Now, because McKinsey knows that their audience is almost entirely comprised of the big wigs of Fortune 500 companies, they frame this AI adoption as a good thing. But if we read between the lines of the report, I think a few things will stand out. There are 2 things I want to show you. Let's look at this first. According to McKinsey, while most respondents report that efficiency gains are an objective of their organization's AI use, high performers are more likely than others to say that their organizations have also set growth and/or innovation as an objective of their AI efforts. And they even include this pretty chart to showcase this fact. Now, that was a lot of corporate speak, but if we translate this into everyday English, what McKinsey is really saying is that for companies to get the most bang for their buck with their AI clients they're now paying for, they need to reinvent their businesses around AI and around maximizing the performance of their high performers. But what does that actually look like in practice? Well, we don't have to guess. We have the data on that as well. Because for 32% of companies that adopt AI programs into their business, they expect that this adoption will allow them to cut back on their workforce. Meanwhile, only 13% of companies that begin to use AI expect that this will result in them expanding their workforce. And so while McKinsey might not want to say it in so many words, it doesn't change the fact that what they're really recommending to major corporations who pay them millions of dollars a year for their advice, no less, that what they need to do is basically replace human workers with AI. And the roles that get replaced are, you guessed it, almost all entry level, which again are the jobs that young people are struggling to get, but they desperately need. Now, I did mention earlier that there were two things in McKinsey's report on AI adoption from earlier this month that I really wanted to highlight to you. Here's the second part. According to them, only 7% of companies have fully adopted AI. Meaning for the other 93% of companies out there, it is still advantageous for them to adopt more AI into their business and to get rid of their employees as a result. But even as I say that, I can already hear what some of you are thinking and what a small subset of you are probably already commenting, which is, but no, AI is a bubble. In a few years, it's gonna be gone and everything will return to normal. And to my hypothetical commenter, maybe you're right. But what I wanna ask is, does that matter? Because even if AI becomes a fad that people abandon in a few years, it is still having today an enormous impact on the lives of young Americans. Because even if companies begin to hire more young employees again, and they abandon this whole idea that AI can do every job, does that change the fact that people would have gone years without being able to find a job that they otherwise could have? No, it doesn't. And on top of that, let's say companies do abandon AI in a major movement. Well, you still have people who are years out of college or out of high school who cannot find work and have been unable to find work for many months or years at this point, who in that situation would be forced to compete against people who graduated a couple years later than them. No matter how you slice this, mass adoption of AI and the other issues we've mentioned so far in this video have put people behind. And so while it's easy to say the market will just rebound if this is a bubble, it's not quite as easy to say that millions of people who have had their lives affected can rebound just as easily. And the only way we're going to solve this long term is by fixing our policies in this country to recognize that the reality of the workforce in the 21st century is not the same as it was when we created most of our labor laws in the early to mid 20th century. And so if you want to hear about 5 policies we need to adopt to give Gen Z a better chance of not only surviving, but potentially even thriving in today's climate, then I recommend that you check out this video here. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.